mean, you really don't realize like these people that are sitting in the comfort of their air conditioned boardrooms in Washington, D.C. and like on Wall Street who are coming up with these monstrous, really murderous policies to really deny average people in these adversary countries access to like the things that we all take for granted in the US,
Basic
like
necessities.
gasoline to put in your car, or you really don't realize how much you rely on fossil fuels until they become like such like a rare commodity. I mean, the level, every from every light you turn on to every product that you purchase at the grocery store, whether it's milk or yogurt or bread, all of that relies on fuel, relies on a truck to get it there. It relies on fuel for like the agriculture sector to grow it, to make it, to feed livestock. Like all of these things go back to fuel. And when that breaks down, the entire country breaks down. And that's what I've watched happen here. So it really is like a testament to the people who live in these countries that they're able to still get through the day based on decisions made by people wearing suits who never have to deal with, not having electricity.
Rania, it's perfect transition to what's going on at COP26 Summit right now. Obviously, this is somewhat of a joke because they're not taking this nearly as seriously as they need to. The need to move to alternative energy so that a lot of the countries that are underdeveloped right now do not have to rely on fossil fuels. But we all know that that's part of the plan. So, if you can speak to what's actually going on right now, and the fact that the countries that really need to be participating are not participating, so it's kind of a moot point that they're even doing this.
It's amazing because the entire global north is like going to this conference and kind of like saying all these really empty pledges and just like phrases about how like and they're like throwing a coin in the air and making a wish, for the world to be better. And you have all these the heads of all these multinational corporations like doing this PR for themselves where they're coming together and saying we're going to help save the climate when the entire narrative about climate change that we're getting even is now like it took until 2021, but the majority of the media has accepted that climate change is real. Humans are causing it, and there's going to be a lot of problems as a result of it, and we need to mitigate it. But at the end of the day, we're still not hearing about the why of climate change. Like, why is this happening? And the root issue this goes to is our economic model. Like, the capitalism is the problem. That is why we have ongoing fossil fuel extraction is because of capitalism, endless consumption because of capitalism on a finite planet. And we're still not talking about it because the people controlling the narrative are like the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and all the countries of the global north that rely on this economic model to dominate the world. And and the people in the global south, there are like robust movements, climate justice movements that at the heart of them are economic equality and our anti-imperialism, and we're not seeing any of that in the way the media is covering this issue, and they never covered this issue that way. Those people are completely ignored. I live in a part of the world that is definitely impacted by climate change. I mean, I remember visiting Lebanon when I was a kid, and then based on now, even in the mountains where it's much cooler, it's really hot. Like there's a difference. It's noticeable. And there's going to be parts of the Middle East that are going to be, I mean, there's kind of parts of the Middle East that are unlivable today. Like I don't know how people live in the Gulf states where it's like 120 degrees. But other parts of the Middle East where like you need land to grow things, those are going to become more desert and people are going to have problems with accessing food. And this is also a region of the world that's been destroyed ecologically already by endless US warfare. And none of that's discussed, none of that's talked about. And so these voices, these people from the global south, from not just Lebanon and, not just the broader Middle East, but people from Latin America, people in Africa, people in Asia, in Southeast Asia, they're being left out of the conversation. And, they're the ones who are dealing with the worst impacts of climate change. They're the ones whose resources have been extracted for the purpose of consumption in the global north. And there's this huge climate debt, a word that you never hear about. There's like, I think there's something like, it's estimated like over $400 trillion in climate debt is owed to the global south by the global north. And that's a number that's never talked about and never discussed because the people controlling the conversation are the people that control everything else in the world. And I just want to say one last thing, climate change isn't an issue that I can like talk about the ins and outs of because it's not really an issue that I'm like, I don't have any expertise in it. But I will recommend someone who I don't think gets recommended enough on the left, especially, is Max Isle. He is probably one of the best people to read. He has a book out recently called A People's Green New Deal, and the title really doesn't do it
Yeah.
justice.
Yeah.
The title doesn't really do it justice though, because it really lays out what needs to happen for us to actually effectively, in a leftist way that will do something to deal with this crisis, and why the the responses that we're hearing, not just from leaders around the world, but even from the people at the forefront of the environmental movement, which has largely
Hmm.
unfortunately been co-opted by like billionaires and their
Right.
foundations, that strip that which is why you never hear them talk about the economic factor of climate change.
No, but what's funny is when you were talking about, it almost sounded like reparations from the global north to the global south, right? And I'm sitting here
Yeah.
thinking, I we can't even have a discussion here on reparations for descendants of American slaves. So the idea that the whole global north would somehow compensate the global south, but and the other main issue that you brought up that I want to talk about is the capitalism aspect, because that is so skewing our perception of everything to the point where, like, when you talk about um, places like Venezuela, where why we hate them is because they were not wanting to have a capitalist model for their natural resources, right? So that was this idea of we all share in the riches of our country and our state, which is, we can't talk like that here because that's like the crazy, socialist talk. And so, like, when we look at it, that dictates our narrative on Venezuela. And it all goes back to really their economic model didn't suit our capitalistic ways. And that is the whole problem. And that really goes to the problem that we have with all of those countries, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, that they're not just giving us what we want.
Right. Like every country in the world is supposed to play a role in this kind of imperial global order that's existed since after World War II, since the US became the, dominant imperial hegemon in the world. And even more so after 1990, right? When the US became the sole superpower, is every country has its role to play. And their role is to be subservient to US, well, to like Western capital at the end of the day, based inside the US. And any country that diverges from that path, even slightly, tries to forge an independent path for itself is attacked by this US war machine that upholds this American imperial order. And for Latin America, that's why we attack Venezuela. And that's why we're trying to overthrow their government, because Hugo Chavez came into power and instituted a socialist platform where he nationalized the resources so North American companies could no longer profit, and the wealth from their own natural resources were shared and used to actually feed people and give them health care and teach them to read. It's why Cuba, since 1959, has been relentlessly attacked and under siege by America till this day, because Cuba refuses to submit to America and has its own system and own model. It's why right now there's elections today in Nicaragua, um, democratic elections. You can say what you want about Nicaragua's leadership. You don't have to like it, but you're not Nicaraguan. But apparently, the Americans and the Europeans think it's up to them to decide who gets to rule Nicaragua. And the person who's in charge right now, the party that's in charge right now, the Sandinistas, are a leftist party, and that's unacceptable. So even before the elections took place, days ago, the Americans came out and said, we refuse to accept the results. Even before the results came out, the US is already saying it's fraudulent, they're unacceptable. Even as like their allies in Latin America, these neoliberal hellholes like Honduras and Colombia, where the government just routinely kills environmental activists, like routinely happens regularly by these paramilitaries in Colombia that are connected to the government, kill human rights and environmental activists every single day, are killed by this government. The US doesn't say a word about democracy or autocracy, because these countries are client states of America and they serve American empire. The same goes for the Middle East. And so at the end of the day, it does come back to upholding capitalism. I mean, imperialism is just a stage of capitalism on a global scale.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.